Just because he's the UFC president doesn't mean he's not without bias. And when Dana White feels a certain way about a fight, you better believe he's going to let the public know about it. One way or the other. As always, if you guys enjoy the video, please be sure to let us know by giving it a like and hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. And now, without further ado and rank to no particular order, here are 10 fights that pissed off Dana White: Anderson Silva vs Demi and Maia. And what better way to kick things off than with one of the most infamously disappointing title fights in UFC history. Not only was this bout the headliner of an important card for the UFC on pay-per-view, but this event was also crucial in their attempts to corner the Middle Eastern market, their first official show in Abu Dhabi since the dawn of the Zuffa era. All was going according to plan, and all that remained was for the fights themselves to deliver. Unfortunately, the main event pairing between Anderson Silva and Demian Maia for the middleweight title was, well, a very strange and quite underwhelming contest. Silva obviously had respect for Maia's elite grappling, but as the belt war on the champion's antics basically ruined any amount of competitive tension as he tiptoed around any real head-on collisions. In the post-fight, Dana White slammed Silva for his performance, publicly even calling the main event an embarrassment.
I don't think I've ever been more embarrassed in the 10 years of being in this business.
Is this your lowest moment as president of UFC?
No doubt about it. Absolutely, 100%. I didn't go in and fight like a jackass for 5 rounds. I'm embarrassed, and I feel like I should apologize to the fans, and I feel like I owe the fans one. What happened tonight was an absolute disgrace, an embarrassment for the UFC, an embarrassment for the sport, and I don't know if I've ever been more embarrassed than I am tonight.
Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. In speaking of boring fights, Dana had already soured on Francis Ngannou following his one-sided loss to Stipe Miocic at UFC 220. But when the Predator attempted to make a comeback at UFC 226, things got even worse. Facing off against the hard-handed Derek Lewis, this bout was pointed to as a collision of two insanely powerful punchers. With that much power on the table, one of these guys was eventually going to hit the canvas right. Well, not exactly. Unfortunately, practically nothing happened for the vast majority of the scheduled 3 rounds, and when all was said and done, Lewis was the one to somehow get the decision victory. Dana pretty much gave Lewis a free pass, though, due to his back injury, and instead went off on Francis Ngannou, taking shots at his overblown ego and his handling of fame.
Thoughts on Francis Ngannou? I mean, he had so much momentum behind him going into the Stipe fight, shows the flaws in his game a little bit, then comes back and has this fight where he throws, 17 strikes the entire fight, something like that. Where do you feel a guy like that goes from here?
Horrible. I think that everybody was talking about him. I thought he was going to be the next guy. I think his ego ran away with him big time. I can tell you that his ego absolutely did run away with him. The minute that happens to you in the fight game, start to fall apart. And this guy's ego just was so out of control. Ego is what hurt Francis Ngannou.
And it wouldn't be the last time that these two were butt heads. Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz 3. Chuck Liddell was a phenomenal champion and a good friend to Dana during his time at the top of the sport. Tito Ortiz, on the other hand, despite once being quite close to the UFC president, is now among his biggest enemies and a guy that Dana is always happy to take shots at if the opportunity presents itself.
Tito and I hated each other. You know how many times Tito fought that I wanted to see him just get his ass whooped? Every time he got beat, it was absolute fun.
So when Tito and Dana White's other nemesis, Oscar De La Hoya, announced that they were bringing Chuck Liddell out of retirement 8 years after his last fight to be served up on a platter for the much younger and in-shape Ortiz, Dana was obviously not.
Chuck's almost 50 years old. I love Chuck Liddell, and as a friend, I don't think he should fight. And anybody around him who cares about him shouldn't let him fight either.
I heard last week the cokehead, Oscar De La Weirdo, is talking that I don't have any, place to tell guys when to retire. I don't tell friends when. First of all, it's called friendship, you cokehead. Chuck Liddell's almost 50 years old and has no business fighting anymore.
And when Tito went out there and toed Theismann and then proceeded to celebrate like he had just won UFC gold. Yeah, this one was very easy to hate on.
Anybody who claims to be a friend of Chuck Liddell and was anywhere near this fight is full of. They're not a friend of Chuck Liddell. I hope somebody talks De La Hoya into fighting again, and I hope he gets knocked out just like Chuck Liddell did in the first round. cokehead nutball.
Tyron Woodley versus Darren. Till sometimes, Dana White just isn't a fan of a champion. Other times, he just gets dollar signs in his eyes when a bright new contender finally breaks. Through UFC 228's headline matchup, Tyron Woodley versus Darren Till combined these two scenarios into one. Woodley was carving out an impressive reign atop the 170-pound division, but he wasn't exactly thrilling audiences.
First of all, I'm gonna give the fans a chance to boo. Go ahead and boo and get it out the way. There you go.
Darren Till was the young, brash, marketable prospect who had broken into the top 5 ahead of UFC 228, and it seemed like the promotion were well and truly behind him.
How excited are you about Darren as a prospect?
No, I'm excited. You know, he's got all the attributes to be a big star. Stylistically, I love the matchup for Till.
But on fight night, Woodley proved a bridge too far, and after knocking Till down in the second round, he locked up a DRS choke and forced the tap, and you could just see how unimpressed Dana White was with the fact that Woodley was still on top. It didn't take long for him to start taking shots at the champion in the media once again.
Since you've left the octagon with your black belt and your title, have you spoken to Dana White?
Oh, I haven't spoken to him yet. Did he already come in here?
No.
He left. No, I hadn't talked to him.
Tyron Woodley versus Demi and Maya Soh. Why did Dana White dislike Tyron Woodley so much? Well, if we were to try and take on the UFC president's perspective, well, on the one hand, you had his constant complaining in the media.
If I was a different complexion, I think people and fans would treat me a different way.
And on the other, you had performances like the ones he turned in against Stephen Thompson and Demi and Maya, highly tactical, but undeniably effective 5-rounders that saw the chosen one deal with 2 incredibly unique matchups. But when Woodley was finished stuffing takedown after takedown from Maya at UFC 214, Dana had nothing but harsh criticism for him and his low output title defense.
What did you think watching that fight?
About watching what fight?
The Woodley fight and then beating Maya.
What did you think about watching the Woodley fight? That fight was anything but special. I don't even want to relive that fight in my head for another second. I mean, this sums it up. They broke a record tonight. The least punches ever thrown in the crappiest fight you've ever seen was 130 punches. They threw 60. That's how bad the fight was.
Not pleased with Tyron Woodley's performance?
They broke the record for the least punches ever thrown in a title fight. There's not much to be pleased with or to talk about. I mean, what really is there to talk about in that fight? When you get booed out of an arena, it means people don't want to watch you fight.
Some might have seen it as a champion adequately overcoming a very tough matchup. Dana was definitely embarrassed by the welterweight king on this night. Israel out of Sanya's Joel Romero. Look, when you're fighting a genetic freak like Joel Romero,
this guy right here is a guy that no one ever calls out. I want to test myself against everyone of this era who's a beast. And he's a beast, so I'm going to test him.
I mean, why else would Izzy specifically call out Joel Romero when he was coming off a loss? Well, as it turned out, Adesanya had no intention of fighting fire with fire. And instead, we were presented with one of the most boring title fights in UFC history. The last tile bender took home the win, but the fight was so low output that it could have frankly gone either way. Safe to say Adesanya lost himself quite a few fans on this night, and Dana White could not help but be embarrassed by the low-quality main event he had so fiercely hyped up beforehand.
We were pretty pissed off in Abu Dhabi after the Anderson Silva Demi and Maya fight. Was your level of disappointment the same with this one as you were after that?
Yeah, this was a terrible fight. I mean, if you look at the UFC as a whole, for as long as we've been doing it, you can literally put in one hand shitty fights that we've done, you know what I mean? The matchmakers didn't love that fight and didn't want to make that fight. But the goofy fan in me said, are you shitting me? Come on, this will be a fun fight to do. Now, hindsight is 2020. Probably shouldn't have done that fight. We should have waited for Costa, but oh well. I was shocked to see the way that he fought tonight. He had a rough night and he had a bad showing, and I don't know.
Dennis Holman versus Brian Ebersol. This next one is pretty simple. Dennis Holman versus Brian Ebersol was not a fight that is particularly relevant in the MMA history book, saved for one particular reason. Holman decided to walk to the octagon and fight wearing a pair of Speedos. This was, of course, before the Reebok and later Venom deals. But even still, this choice of fight kit really did stand out, and Dana was quick to blast Holman after the fight, calling his choice disgusting.
The shorts on Dennis Holman, disgraceful, would you say? I mean, how'd you feel about that?
I'd call it disgusting. That was disgusting. For the first time ever, I'm giving out a
Thanks for getting those horrifying shorts off TV as soon as possible, bonus. And I'm not joking.
First of all, I'm pissed off that somebody that works for me let him come out with those on. Number one, it was not good. It will never happen again. I can guarantee you that. That's the last thing you want to be remembered for, is going out there and making people watch 5 minutes of that.
The fighter himself would later admit that he lost a bet, and that's why he did what he did. But the damage was already done. George St. Pierre versus Johnny Hendricks. Even if you're one of the all-time greats of the sport, that doesn't mean that you're safe from Dana's wrath and for George St. Pierre. A closely fought matchup against Johnny. Hendricks left the world thinking that the great GSP had finally been dethroned. But in the end, the decision went his way. However, that wasn't the problem, nor the issue as it relates to Dana Kane when St. Pierre announced his retirement from the sport, effectively leaving the division without its champion and cheapening the belt in the eyes of the fans, given that he never officially lost.
I have a bunch of stuff in my life happening. I need to hang up my glove for a little bit.
And to say that Dano was not happy would be putting it lightly. Instead of giving one of the mightiest champions a nice send-off, White turned on him in the post-fight press conference, slamming St. Pierre for walking away after a performance like that.
Did you see Jordan get smashed and hurt in the first round? It's about damage. I want what's fair, and that wasn't fair. That decision that happens, right? You don't just say, hey, I'm going to take a while off. Maybe I'll be back. Maybe I won't. You owe it to the fans. You owe it to that belt. You owe it to this company, and you owe it to Johnny Hendricks to give him that opportunity to fight again.
And hey, if you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to let us know by giving it a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing.